Hello, everybody. Welcome into GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, March 3rd. It is officially March. Hope everybody's having a great day so far. We have a lot to get into, some wild stuff over the weekend, including a massive trade in the NFL that saw Deebo Samuel swap teams. Deebo Samuel now a Washington Commander in exchange for a fifth-round pick. We'll also talk a little bit more about Matthew Stafford. He, of course, returns to the Los Angeles Rams after rumors were that he would go to the Raiders or the Giants. We'll talk about what his contract looks like. Then we're going to get into a little bit about what Rick Pitino said, head coach of St. John's, a legendary head coach, a legendary figure in college basketball. As it is March, we got to lock in a little bit for March Madness before continuing our series, getting into some off-season preview for the Chicago Bears, a crucial off-season for them, and what a big offseason means for the Chicago Cubs. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, March 3rd. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our first topic, which of course is Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel officially finds a new home. This is someone that has been unhappy or reportedly asked for trades multiple times over his tenure with the San Francisco 49ers. He gets moved over to the Commanders for a first-round pick. And my initial reaction to this is that I love this move. This is a move that I love for the Commanders. I also like it for the 49ers a little bit, right? They don't have to pay the full $17.5 million that would have been owed to Deebo. They do take a little bit of dead cap money, but still, $17.5 million off the book is going to be pretty good for a team that actually has a lot of free agents they need to focus on and re-sign this season. They've also talked about moving off of some other guys to get a little bit younger. Potentially we see a Brandon Ayuk trade later. But getting to the Commanders side of things, I love this move for the Commanders. This is a move that I think this is a team and a system I think Deebo was built for. This is a system that I think Deebo Samuel was born to play in with Cliff Kingsbury. Cliff Kingsbury is a guy that loves to use his short passing game over the middle, behind the line of scrimmage, get the ball out of your quarterback's hand quickly, very creative with the movement behind the line of scrimmage, all stuff that Deebo Samuel excels at, and all stuff that the Washington Commanders, quite frankly, were just not very good at last season. Now, Deebo Samuel has been on the decline since his all-pro explosion in 2021. He's not going to be that kind of player. He's not magically going to become this all-pro guy after 4 years of not being him. He's not going to go from 50 catches for 670 yards and 4 touchdowns to a guy that, is going to go for 1,400 receiving yards again and is going to run for another 400 on the ground. He's not going to be putting that up again. But this is someone that if you get him into the right system, especially with a wide receiver like Terry McLaurin on the outside, which when he was super productive, even when he was a little bit less productive than 2021, when he was as productive as he was in 2022 with 2022 or 2023 with the emergence of Brandon Ayuk, I think that's kind of how it's going to go with Terry McLaurin there, right? You have a guy that's a really big threat down the sidelines, and that's something that he hasn't had over in San Francisco for a long time. Deebo Samuel excels at being over the middle of the field. You get the ball in Deebo Samuel's hands over the middle of the field, he's going to make something happen. He's going to make a guy miss, break a tackle, and that's his specialty. The other thing, like we said, the Washington Commanders run a lot of wide receiver screens. It gets to the point where it's not fun to watch their game sometimes because that's all they seem to run, whether that's because of Jaden Daniels being a rookie quarterback or it's just because of the system that Cliff Kingsbury wants to run. it's still something that Deebo Samuel will be amazing at. We've saw him be pretty effective last season on the punt on the kick return game, right? You get him the ball in space, he'll bounce off a couple tackles, he'll be able to move the ball downfield. And that's kind of the role that I think he's going to play in Washington. He's going to take over the role of a Noah Brown or an Olamide Zaccheaus, these guys that were wide receiver twos at different stretches of the season. Olamide Zaccheaus was the number 2 receiver. By yardage, he only had about 500 yards, right? You're going to be able to get that at a Deebo at a minimum. In the playoffs, Noah Brown was the wide receiver too. He was a guy that really stepped up against the Lions, a guy that had huge games, huge performances, especially down the stretch of the season. This is someone, if you're able to get Deebo Samuel into that kind of role, a guy that will open up the middle of the field, something that they just had Zach Ertz doing. And Zach Ertz, as good as he is, Zach Ertz isn't someone you want to be your primary middle of the field target. You get 56 screens a year to Deebo Samuel. Obviously, they're not going to all go to Deebo Samuel, but they ran the 3rd most wide receiver screens in the NFL. The Washington Commanders did last year. You get Deebo Samuel the ball in space and you just let something happen with him. This is going to be an offense that's going to go. How good does this make the Commanders, though, is the real question. This is a Commanders team that made it to the NFC Championship game last year. This is not a move that's going to push the Commanders over the top of the Eagles, a team that decimated them in that game, right? This is a move that is going to help open up that offense even more than it already was. But the biggest problem for the Washington Commanders was not on the offensive end. The biggest problem for the Commanders was on the defensive end. The good news is the Washington Commanders still have over $70 million in cap space to go out and make something happen. They only gave up a 5th-round pick that they were able to use when they got rid of when they got rid of other receivers earlier on in the season. Right, this has been a masterclass by Adam Peters. Adam Peters, the former 49ers assistant GM. He spent a lot of time over there. He helped draft Deebo Samuel. This is a guy that has relationships over there. And Deebo Samuel comfortable with Adam Peters. I think this is a really good move. There's obviously a risk in this. Deebo Samuel has been on the decline every single year since 2021, whether that be because of injuries or the offense changing as we get more and more of Brock Purdy. That's up for interpretation. But I think this is a great move, great change of scenery move for Deebo Samuel, for the Washington Commanders, and I really don't see a way that this doesn't improve their team pretty drastically. There were times when, especially against the Eagles early in the season, the first time they played each other, they were shut down because the Eagles were able to stuff up that run game. Deebo can help in that a little bit. And they were able to shut down Terry McLaurin, which they did twice, really. Terry McLaurin was the driving force of that offense. Outside of the quarterback, if he had a good game, the rest of the offense generally had a good game. I really do love this Deebo move. I don't think there's a downside for the Washington Commanders in this one. There's a lot of people that I've seen saying that this doesn't change too much, and sure, it doesn't change too much, but it shows that the Washington Commanders are going to be out there, they're going to be buyers, and they're going to be trying to make this team better as quick as possible, surrounding their young quarterback in Jaden Daniels. You also get a Deebo Samuel at age 29 that still's got a good amount of years left in the tank. You're not expecting him to be a wide receiver 1. You got him for a 5th-round pick. You're expecting him to be a wide receiver 2, potentially even a wide receiver 3. This is a move that is not going to hurt you deep into the future, even if it doesn't work out right away. Even if it doesn't work out at all. If Deebo Samuel was sitting in the 5th round, I think anybody would go and draft him. He is someone that is well worth a 5th-round pick, and he's someone that I think fits near perfectly into this Washington Commanders offense. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. How do you think this trade went? Do you think the Commanders killed it? Do you think they got fleeced? Do you think Deebo's going to do a good job over there or not? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention over to Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford, now the reminted quarterback of the Los Angeles Rams. Is it a good move? How much did he get paid? We'll talk about all of that and more coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, March 3rd, if you are just tuning in. We just finished going over the Deebo Samuel trade that saw Washington send a 5th-round pick to San Francisco in exchange for the 2021 All-Pro receiver, Deebo Samuel. In this segment, we turn our attention to another team in California and their negotiations with one Matthew Stafford. The Rams and Matthew Stafford have reportedly agreed on a restructured contract. We'll talk about what that means for him, what it means as repercussions continue to go around the league, and much more. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, March 3rd. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit on Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, a top 8 quarterback in my opinion, one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the NFC, gets his big money finally. He was one of the first big dominoes that needed to fall this NFL offseason. Of course, there are a lot of QB-needy teams, whether it be the Jets, the Giants, the Steelers, the Raiders, the Titans, the Browns. There are a lot of QB-needy teams out there that were chomping at the bit to go and get Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford would have been and still was the best quarterback on the market, even at age 37, after nearly leading the Rams to upset the future Super Bowl champions in the Philadelphia Eagles. This is a team that pushed them to the brink, all the way down to a potential game-winning drive in the snow, got all the way down to about the 30-yard line, about 30 yards away from potentially sending it to overtime. Instead, Eagles go on to win their second NFL championship in the Super Bowl era, right? But Matthew Stafford was a part of lots of rumors. One of the biggest and most prevalent ones that we talked about on Friday, were with the Raiders and the Giants. But now he has decided to come back. He went and tested the market. The Rams gave him the ability to see what else he could get out there. And reports are he was being offered a lot. The Raiders and the Giants were both reportedly offering around $60 million a year. He turns around and takes what is considered to be a discount for the Rams. Now, it hasn't come out exactly how much the discount is, but it does say that he's taking significantly less than what he would have gotten if he had gone to the Raiders or the Giants. Now, those two were the teams that were really, really in on Matthew Stafford. Now, it doesn't seem like the Rams were ever truly interested in getting off of Matthew Stafford. They were just trying to figure out what it would take to keep him around. And what it would take is still exact numbers are a mystery, but he gets quote unquote a big raise in 2025 and some more guarantees in 2026. Of course, it seemed like the Raiders were on track to get him after we saw a coincidental meeting between him and Tom Brady at a ski resort. The Giants had been rumored around him for a long time. But let's take a look at the fallout here, right? He decides to come back to the Rams. Now the Rams don't need that quarterback. They're no longer in that quarterback market. One of the big guys that was expecting to potentially replace Matthew Stafford was Aaron Rodgers. And for Aaron Rodgers, this Rams gig would have been by far the best one out there. Right now, Aaron Rodgers is not talked about in the highest regard. And I think there's a fair argument to say that he might be washed at this point. But Aaron Rodgers is also a quarterback that, when you look at the passing numbers, was near identical with the MVP winner, Josh Allen. He had 100 more yards, same amount of touchdowns, a couple more interceptions, right? Obviously, that's a little bit misleading because Josh Allen does so much else to help your team, especially on the ground with his huge frame, his huge body, his ability to make the plays that Aaron Rodgers just doesn't have the athleticism or the ability to do anymore, right? But Aaron Rodgers still is a quarterback that I believe can be a winning quarterback in the NFL. Aaron Rodgers, his best option out there was going to be the Rams. It doesn't seem like the Steelers' option is super real. It seems like they're pretty much set on Justin Fields or Russell Wilson, leaning more towards Justin Fields. But now where does he go? One of those teams that has turned their attention to them is the New York Giants. The New York Giants have been starved for a quarterback. They were all in on Matthew Stafford. Now they say, you know what? We want another bridge quarterback at that pick number 3. If they don't get their guy, or maybe they think that they want a guy to be there to let a guy like Shedeur Sanders, or if they trade up Cam Ward, to sit behind for a little bit. I don't know if Aaron Rodgers is really that guy. I don't know if Aaron Rodgers is really the right guy to bring in and say, you know what, I want you to be a mentor. He didn't really do it for Jordan Love, although I think eventually they kind of figured it out. He definitely didn't do it for Zach Wilson, although I'm not sure how well Zach Wilson would have turned out with or without him. But the Giants are very interested in Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, I don't know how interested he is in them. But if he doesn't go to the Giants, it seems like he's taking a backup gig, right? Again, a lot of people are pointing out the Minnesota Vikings to either start the season for a little bit ahead of J.J. McCarthy. J.J. McCarthy, who really loves Aaron Rodgers. He's got a little bit of that Aaron Rodgers energy-esque to him as well, and complete that Brett Favre arc that he is so close to completing right now. But that honestly might be option 2. Right? He's not going to get the starting gig in a lot of places. A lot of teams are just not going to be able to sit with what he does off the field at the level of play he's giving you. If he was a quiet quarterback, if he sat back and did nothing, like Russell Wilson, for instance, more teams would be interested. I guarantee you teams would be knocking at his door, lining up down the block to bring him in if he just wasn't as loud as he was. But that's what you're going to get. You got to take the good with the bad with Aaron Rodgers, and these teams understand that, right? So because of that, his suitor list is significantly dwindled from what you might expect a former 4-time MVP, Super Bowl champion quarterback who still is at least a league average quarterback to be getting, especially when there's so many quarterback needy teams and not so many quarterbacks in free agency or the draft this year. But Aaron Rodgers looks like the Giants are the number one customer right now, and if not, he might just have to take a backup role or a placeholder role while waiting for someone to get healthy, either in Minnesota or maybe a place like Tennessee or Cleveland. But the bigger fallout, I think, goes with the Raiders, because the Raiders truly were Matthew Stafford or bust, from what it seems. A report came out that the Raiders weren't super interested in Sam Darnold eventually, or Russell Wilson originally, right? Russell Wilson would reunite with Pete Carroll. Sam Darnold looking for a place to start. But now that they don't have Matthew Stafford, Do they turn back their attention to a Russell Wilson? Is Russell Wilson back on the table? I think he absolutely should be. The two options, Russell Wilson and Sam Darnold, probably are the best options. Do they go back to Jimmy G? That didn't work. I doubt that they go and sign him. But Russell Wilson is someone that I think could fit really well. Of course, he already has that previous success. We talk about the NFL. We just talked about Deebo going to Washington. A lot of that, and a lot of the reason I think that Washington was willing to make this trade was because Adam Peters, the GM, has a relationship with Deebo Samuel, has a relationship within the 49ers organization, and decided that he was willing to take the risk. We have Pete Carroll now, who knows Russell Wilson very well, had his most successful years with Russell Wilson in the NFL. That's a reunion that I think could work pretty well. Sam Darnold, he doesn't really know as well. And I am not on that Sam Darnold hype train. I understand if you are. He had a good season last year. He led a very successful offense, but it was a stacked offense that I truly believe any half-competent quarterback could succeed in. Succeed to 14 wins? Maybe not. But make a playoff run with it? Yeah, that's a very good situation to be in, and I think J.J. McCarthy is going to get overrated because of that. But I digress. The fallout for the Raiders, it seems like they're leaning towards Russell Wilson. A reunion over there, but Sam Darnold is going to require more money, is going to be a little bit younger. I just don't think it makes a lot of sense for the Raiders to dump that much money into what would be a bridge quarterback for them, which kind of leaves Sam Darnold in the wins. Where does he go? Sam Darnold, I think, is going to be always the bridesmaid, never the bride in this offseason. He's someone that really tanked his stock with his last couple of performances, and recency bias is a real thing in the NFL. Recency bias is something that truly does hurt a lot of these guys that try and make a name for themselves, that are trying to get that big money contract. It either hurts or it helps them a lot, right? And for Sam Darnold, it's certainly hurting him. His last two times out on the field were definitely his worst two games of the seasons, and they were in the biggest moments. He cost himself a contract that could have been upwards of $50 million a year to now not even sure if he's going to crack that 45 mark, right? Sam Darnold, I think at this point, I don't think Minnesota wants him back. They've got the next guy waiting in the wings. I think he might end up on the Browns, which I don't think would be a good spot for him. The Browns looking for the next guy at number 2, especially if they move off of Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett, who they doubled down and said that they're not trading him, although Myles Garrett himself doubled down and said, I don't care if you make me the highest paid non-quarterback in the history of the NFL, which reportedly was the offer on the table. I don't want to play in Cleveland. So something's got to give at some point, and I think it's going to be the Browns that are going to have to give at this point because, I mean, he could hold out, right? The Browns need to get something. It's kind of a disaster if Myles Garrett holds out at that point, and I think he's got a little bit more leverage than the Browns do. Sam Darnold might just end up over there. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think of Matthew Stafford? Matthew Stafford returning to the Rams was the right decision for him. It was the right decision for the Rams, and I'm glad they came to it. I'm glad they figured out that money. They needed to figure that out. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we switch over to college basketball. It is March. So we are going to take a look at one of the bigger stories around college basketball right now, and that is St. John's. Also, Rick Pitino, the head coach of St. John's, has a really interesting recruiting strategy that I'm not sure if it's going to be good or bad for the future of college basketball. We're going to talk about that and much more coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now. Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, March 3rd. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over Matthew Stafford re-signing with the Los Angeles Rams and the fallout from that around the NFL. In this segment, we're going to get into a little bit of college basketball. It's March. The madness is right around the corner. We're going to talk about St. John's a little bit, a really interesting team, but also a really interesting recruiting strategy from their head coach, Rick Pitino. We'll get to that in a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, March 3rd. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit of college basketball talk here, specifically surrounding Rick Pitino. Rick Pitino, the head coach of St. John's up in New York, he says he will not recruit a single high schooler, which is really interesting to me, right? Aside from the fact that St. John's, a top 10 ranked team in the country right now by the AP poll, a team that's going to get a top 3 seed as long as they continue to win out right now in the Big East, a team that is built really weird compared to what you might expect basketball to look like. They're not the greatest three-point shooting team. They're not the greatest offensive team. What they are is big, strong, physical. They will out-rebound you. They will play tough physical defense on you, get you out of your game, and that's why they're winning basketball games right now. They're going to be an interesting one to watch as we get further into March here. But Rick Pitino, as their head coach, is a guy that's seen a lot of success. He's a guy that's been a legend of the game throughout his career in multiple stops around the NCAA. He says he's done recruiting high schoolers. With the state of the NIL and the state of the transfer portal, he says he's done. Not going to recruit a single high schooler, which in my opinion is probably going to come back and bite him in the long term. In the short term, it's not a big deal. He says he's going to replace his graduating guys, of which there are 3 seniors or grad students on this team, with the transfer portal. And that's not the worst thing. This is not a St. John's team that is particularly old. This is a St. John's team that will at least stick together for a little bit longer, as long as these guys don't leave for bigger colleges and transfer out, which when you're a team as successful as St. John's is, and in a conference like the Big East, you should be able to keep a majority of your guys. Not a guarantee you'll be able to keep all of them, but a majority of them you should at least have the ability to keep around. They're going to spend that NIL money on the transfer portal, which, like I said, is an interesting strategy. This is something that could, if it's successful for Rick Pitino and St. John's, be a ripple effect for the rest of the sport. We already start to see this in a lot of different places. Mid-majors continuously get picked apart by these bigger programs, the best of them the best of those players always ending up in a power conference, in a Big East, in a Big Ten, in an SEC, in the ACC, in places like that from around college basketball. You always want to move up, right? And you can't blame those guys for doing it, but that's on the transfer portal. If you're using NIL money, he said he would pass up a 5-star to go and get someone in the transfer portal. Now, experience is important in college basketball. We've seen teams like that Zion-led Duke team a couple years ago flushed with talent. The number 1 overall seed in March Madness get upset. We've seen recently, the last couple years, an experienced UConn team win back-to-back titles. We've also seen what happens when guys stay together. When you have a high level of continuity, when you have a high level of experience, it generally bodes well when it comes to March. It's something that helps. Being able to, say we've been here before, we know what it's like to play under the brightest lights. It's something that can get to some of these young guys, right? It's something that can get to some of these players, and that's a normal thing, right? But having that experience, having that continuity under a same coach with the same team not only makes you a better teammate, but it just makes you a better team in general, right? You know what your guys are going to do. You know what their strengths are. You know what their weaknesses are. You know if I cut in, he's going to be in the corner. You know where these guys are supposed to be. You know when they're doing wrong. You know who you work best with on the pick and roll. You know all of this stuff if you play together longer. It just naturally makes you better. And with the transfer portal, it kind of hurts that. The transfer portal is not a bad thing inherently, right? The transfer portal in general, I would say, is a good thing. It helps these schools continue to play at a high level, but it also helps the players that deserve to play at a higher level get to the higher level they're at. As a fan of a mid-major team, I'm never going to be a full advocate for the transfer portal because they keep sapping the talent from my teams, right? But the transfer portal also helps these mid-major teams, especially if they're one of these mid-major teams that's constantly trying to make a tournament appearance, constantly making those tournament appearances, whether it be auto bids or not. They're going to be one of those higher tier mid-major teams, right? One of those teams that's going to be a stepping stone for these guys going across to whatever they think they can be. It's still a step up from a lot of other schools, right? So it's something that isn't a bad thing at all. But saying you're not going to recruit a single high schooler, saying you're done recruiting these young guys, you'd pass up a 5-star, I think can actually hurt you when it comes to the transfer portal, because a lot of times where these guys transfer to isn't random. Every once in a while, you have a Duke or a UNC come knocking on your door if you play if you play for a UMBC, right? A team that if you play for UMBC and you have a Duke or North Carolina come offering out of nowhere, go and take that, right? But a lot of times, these coaches these guys that are transferring are going to places that recruited them at least a little bit in high school, right? It's still a pipeline, right? These coaches, they're not just going to recruit some random player. They're obviously going to go off people they know, and it's a lot easier to know what you're getting with a guy that you've already studied, a guy that you've said he will work in my system, and a guy that you have actively recruited. Easier for the coach to target and easier for the player to be like, I know I want to work with this guy. I know I like this guy, because it's equally important for these players to go to a place that they enjoy, a place that they think they'll be successful at. And if you already have a relationship, it just gets that much easier to do it. So as much as I respect Rick Pitino, as much as I think Rick Pitino is a legendary coach and someone that knows a lot more basketball, a lot more college basketball than I do, right? It's still something that I think will hurt him in the long run. In the short term, he still has these relationships with guys that he can get out of the transfer portal. But if he goes the next 10 years without talking to a single high schooler, he's not only going to fall behind the 8 ball on finding these transfer guys, but he's going to fall very far behind with other coaches when they're competing in the transfer portal, regardless of how much money he throws at them. Unless it's a ridiculous amount of money, way more than other teams are paying, it just makes it that much harder for you to actually convince them to come play at St. John's, come play for Rick Pitino, and I think it's going to hurt him in the future. I'm curious to see how it goes, because if this works, maybe other teams, maybe other big teams, maybe other conferences, maybe other teams in the Big East continue to say, yeah, we're done with high schoolers, which will push high schoolers over to the mid-majors, which is just going to basically be a step along the way to this to the bigger programs. Maybe they stay a little longer in college, or maybe they start to propel some new colleges to the top, some new conferences to the top. It'll be really interesting to see. But if this is the beginning of a pattern, which I don't think it will be, because I don't think this is going to work out in the long run, I'm very curious to see the effects. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think it's a good idea to stop recruiting high schoolers? Do you think it's something that will work in the long run for some of these bigger schools? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we continue our series of what a dream NFL offseason might look like, what the perfect NFL offseason might look like for the Chicago Bears. A massive offseason for them. We'll talk about that and much more coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found. For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, March 3rd, if you were just tuning in. We just finished going over some news from college basketball. St. John's head coach Rick Pitino says he will not recruit another high schooler ever again. A bold move from him. Not sure if that's going to work out. In this segment, we continue our series on the NFL perfect offseason, a dream offseason, if you will, turning our attention to the Chicago Bears. A must-be successful offseason for them. We'll talk about what they have to do to turn their season around coming up in just a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, March 3rd. But like I was saying, we are going to get into what a perfect offseason might look like for the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears, of course, coming off of a very disappointing year, going 5-12, finishing last place in the NFC North, a team that could not buy a win near the end of the season, a team that finished losing 11 out of their last 12 games. After starting 4-2, starting off so hot, everything seemed to turn down for them. They had maybe the most series of unfortunate events style season that you possibly could have seen. Losing on a last-second Hail Mary, losing on a blocked field goal, right? Losing on a field goal after losing in overtime after making an onside kick, which is incredibly rare in the NFL nowadays. These heartbreaking time clock management, miscues, everything that could go wrong, seemingly going wrong for this Chicago Bears squad at the very worst time. And with a rookie quarterback in Caleb Williams, where all the promise in the world was there, the worst offensive line in the NFL came and just shut everything down. He had no time in the pocket. He had the third most amount of sacks in a season in NFL history. He is someone that was shell-shocked all season long, but the good news is they get the prize jewel of the coaching search. They went out and they got Ben Johnson, someone that had been extra selective with where he was going to take his head coaching opportunities, turning down multiple teams last season. And on top of that, they have now $79 million in cap space, the fourth most in the NFL. Obviously, the big thing that they need to address is the offensive line. But with their pending free agent situation, it's not the worst, right? You have a couple of key pieces. Wide receiver Keenan Allen, who despite not having the greatest numbers, was really like a safety valve for Caleb Williams last season. He was the guy that got turned to and really had the biggest season for the wide receivers of the Chicago Bears. You've got a couple edge rushers and defensive players, DeMarcus Walker on the defensive line, Darrell Taylor and Jacob Martin on the edge, both guys with at least 3 sacks this season, are going to be gone. That was a stout Bears defense, though, so they should be fine in bringing them back or replacing them. But where the real issue with free agency comes is, again, that offensive line, right? Both of your guards, Tevin Jenkins and Matt Pryor, are gone, as well as your center in Coleman Shelton. All 3 of your interior offensive linemen are gone. Now, the outside offensive linemen also probably need to be gone, but they can address that over free agency and the draft. So I don't think there's any of these guys that is a must re-sign. If you want to bring back a couple of them, maybe the defensive players, maybe you bring back Keenan Allen if the deal is cheap enough, but this is not a team that needs Keenan Allen, right? They have DJ Moore, a top receiver in the NFL. They have Rome Odunze, who they drafted in the top 10 last season. This is someone that is a little bit older, a little bit washed, not really bad, but someone that is not quite at the same level that you might expect him to be if you're paying him the big money. In free agency, what can I say? I can keep saying it again and again. Offensive line, offensive line, offensive line. You have $79 million. Spend it on the line. Now, a couple of the top guys that I would have targeted have been franchise tagged in Ulrich Johnson and Trey Smith for the Rams and the Chiefs, but that still leaves a couple of good options. You have Cam Robinson, a left tackle who got traded mid-season. He's someone that I think would be huge for the Bears to bring in. Brandon Scherf. These guys are a little bit older, but still pretty good. A guard. They desperately need a guard after losing all of their interior guys. And Ryan Kelly at center from the Indianapolis Colts. Bring in all 3 of them. Bring in more. Bring in every single star offensive lineman you possibly can. Outside of the offensive line, get a running back. Ben Johnson loves his running backs. He has developed one of the best two-headed monsters in the NFL in Detroit over there with David Montgomery and Gibbs over there, right? This is one of the best two-headed monsters over there. And that's a tough thing to just bring back up and do again. It's not something he's just going to be able to try and just develop. They have DeAndre Swift, who Ben Johnson decided wasn't good enough. He's still a guy that might be interesting, but there's a couple running backs on the market that if you can get cheap enough might be interesting. There's Najee Harris, although I don't know how much I love him in that role. Javonte Williams is a guy that I really do like. He's someone that, after getting injured in Denver his rookie season, never really quite was the same, but I think if you get him into the right system, especially if they start to build an offensive line, he's a big physical back that could do wonders for this team. And if you're looking for a receiving back, kind of like Gibbs was, get Ty Johnson out of Buffalo. One of the best receiving backs in the league. Ty Johnson had 12 yards a carry, basically, last season. He had pretty good production through the air as well, especially for a running back 3 over there in that system. Go and target one of those guys. Make him be that lightning and thunder duo that you like, either keeping DeAndre Swift and Roschon Johnson, or moving off of one of them, I think these are guys that you might want to look at. There's been lots of mocks where the Bears go out and draft an Ashton Genty at number 8 overall. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think at this point you need to get an offensive lineman, the best one available. If Will Campbell is available out of LSU, you are hitting that button as soon as possible. In fact, he's someone that might even be worth trading up for. If not, Josh Simmons out of Ohio State is said to be is projected to be healthy for the start of the season. It's a little bit of a risk, but he's probably the second best offensive lineman in the draft. If you don't really want to take that risk, go for Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas. One of those 3 guys you need to take at number 8. This is a Bears defense that's pretty set. They've got good guys at the corners. They've got good guys up the middle, good guys on the pass rush. They can get better. They can get deeper, but the offensive line is issue number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 this season. They need to address that. They need to hit that, and they need to make sure that Caleb Williams can stay upright. Now, of course, it's not just the offensive line. Caleb Williams also needs to learn to throw the ball quicker. He needs to get the ball out faster. He can't be playing hero ball like he was at USC. He can't do all the twirly whirls that he did in college. He's just not that kind of athlete. He's an escape artist, but he gets into trouble sometimes when he tries to do everything just a little bit too much. He is someone that I still believe can be the best quarterback in what was an elite rookie class. And that's saying a lot. Jaden Daniels just took a team to the NFC Championship game. Do I think it's going to happen right away? I don't know. But getting Ben Johnson is a huge first step. Fixing that offensive line is step, again, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Fix that offensive line. The rest of that team is good. If they're able to put together even a top half of the league offensive line, a 15th ranked offensive line in the NFL, this is a team that I think can make one of the bigger jumps in the NFL this year. They won 5 games last year. A lot of their losses were very close. If the ball bounces another way, if a ball gets tipped into the air or tipped down onto the ground, maybe they end up winning those games. Maybe if they manage the clock better, they end up winning those games. This was a feisty Chicago team, and I think this is the year that we finally see that breakout as long as they fix that offensive line. But I'd love to hear your thought. What do you think they're going to do this offseason? What do you think they're going to do at the draft? Do you think they'll be able to turn it around? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we keep our attention in Chicago, but we go over to Wrigley. That's right, we're talking about the Chicago Cubs. Last season, they just barely missed the playoffs. Second in the NL Central. They were busy with trades, acquisitions this offseason. We'll talk about if that made them a better team and if it made them the favorite in a really, really tight NL Central. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, March 3rd. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over what a perfect offseason might look like for the Chicago Bears. In this segment, we turn our attention crosstown, stay in Chicago, but change our sport over to baseball, talk about what the Chicago Cubs might look like this season. Coming off of a year where they were second in their division, finishing with 83 wins, we'll talk about what they did this offseason and if that made them a true playoff contender. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, March 3rd. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit about the Chicago Cubs. The Chicago Cubs were busy this offseason. They turned a lot into a lot, and I'm not sure how much it really made a difference. Let's talk about it. Of course, last season, they barely missed the playoffs. Tied for second place in the NL Central, going 83-79, 10 games back of the division champion, the Milwaukee Brewers. They were busy in free agency. They went out and got a couple guys that could be solid depth pieces on minor league deals, including outfielder Travis Jankowski, infielder Nicky Lopez, relief pitcher Trevor Richards, and a couple more, as well as guys that could eventually be solid depth pieces. Chris Flexen, who, despite going 3-15 with the White Sox in 30 starts, kept his ERA under 5 on the worst team in the history of baseball. The guys that they got on the minor league deals, minor league rosters, are going to pay huge dividends already. Infielder Justin Turner, third baseman, first baseman, wherever you want to put him, a one-year deal at 40 years old. He's not going to be your everyday guy, but he still has had really solid seasons with some solid power, even though he's a little bit older. As well as bringing in guys like John Birdie to be a utility bat, Colin Ray as a relief, as a depth piece in the starting rotation, who had a really solid season last year with the Brewers. 12-6, 4.29 ERA. Caleb Thielbar to go into the bullpen, a guy that's been a strikeout machine. Four seasons in a row of his K per 9 being over 10. Carson Kelly on a 2-year deal to be a backup catcher, and Matthew Boyd, 2 years, $29 million to be a middle-of-the-rotation starting pitcher. There were a lot of big money moves that they made that are going to pay huge dividends immediately for this team. But it wasn't just that. They were busy in the trade market as well. They went out and got Ryan Brassier with the trade with the Dodgers for cash. He's going to be a piece of that bullpen. With the Astros, they made a couple big moves, getting their closer in Ryan Presley, giving up Juan Bello, and as well as getting Kyle Tucker, one of their starting outfielders, in exchange for third baseman Isaac Paredes, who's going to kill it over there in Houston, starting pitcher Hayden Wesneski, and third base prospect Cam Smith. Wesneski, prospect as well. Smith already killing it in spring training over there, but still, this was a trade that they needed to push the envelope a little bit further in a division that they're so close to getting. But that wasn't it. They made a couple more big trades. They acquired starting pitcher Cody Petit in exchange for Cody Bellinger and cash heading over to the Yankees, as well as getting a relief pitcher Eli Morgan for outfielder Alfonso Rosario. These are a lot of big moves that they're making. These aren't just little splash in the pan trades they're making. These aren't just throw it away, kind of tossed in the corners of the minor league trades. You're getting starters. You're getting Kyle Tucker, Ryan Presley in these trades. These guys that, sure, they're a little bit older, but these are going to be massive pieces of your team for the next 2-3 seasons if you can keep them on. You had to give up a lot for Kyle Tucker, one of the best hitters in the game. Isaac Paredes, who they traded for at the deadline last year, but I think this works out better for them anyway. Being able to put Matt Shaw at third base, I think, is something that probably helps this team a little bit more. right? You have a you have a really solid amount of depth, especially in the minors if anything were to happen. But you take a look at this lineup, right? Ian Happ, who's been a really solid guy for them, leading off in left field. Kyle Tucker, newly acquired in a trade in right at hitting second. Seiya Suzuki at DH, who really turned it around last season. Michael Bush or Justin Turner playing first in that 4-hole. Dansby Swanson at shortstop hitting 5. Nico Horner at second. Pete Crow Armstrong, really great guy who just graduated out of being a prospect in center field. Elite defense over there. Matt Shaw at third and Miguel Amaya at catcher with, of course, the newly acquired Carson Kelly right behind him. Right, but it wasn't all roses, right? They had to let a couple people go, including Patrick Wisdom, who was huge for them when they blew it up the first time. Michael Tachman, Nick Madrigal, Kyle Hendricks, Jorge Lopez, and Drew Smiley, right? It wasn't all additions. This was a team that was busy in the offseason. When you compare it to a team like the Cardinals, who they had the same exact record as last year, who did literally nothing. This is a team that is looking to build on the positives that they had. They're looking to build on being so close to the playoffs, and they're looking to build back from a team that blew it up and was in a full rebuild not that long ago, right? They made a big swing on Cody Bellinger. That didn't work. They trade him over to the Dodgers, and they get an upgrade over there, right? They're able to get Kyle Tucker. That's a huge win for them, and they honestly didn't have to give up as much as they probably would have if they traded for him in the middle of last season, right? You look at the rotation. Sure, it could be a little bit better, but Shoto Imanaga was really good last season. Justin Seal and Jamison Tyone are solid middle-of-the-pack guys, and Matthew Boyd and Colin Rea we talked about when we were getting at the free agent additions. These two guys had pretty solid seasons last year. They got good money. They're great back-end of rotation guys. In the bullpen, Ryan Presley, they trade for him. He's going to be their closer. That goes along with Porter Hodge, Ryan Brassier, who they traded for Tyson Miller, Nate Pearson, Caleb Thielbar, Julian Merriweather, and Keegan Thompson, right? This is not a team that I think is anywhere close to being a World Series contender. But when you talk about competing for the NL Central, you're talking about competing with the Brewers, who in my opinion got worse. You're talking about competing with the Cardinals, who in my opinion got worse. You're talking about competing with the Pirates, who aren't there yet. I think they got a little bit better, but they're not there yet. And you're talking about competing with the Reds, who could be there. They're a very young team that if their guys develop, if they stay healthy, if their pitchers, especially their pitchers, stay healthy, they could be good. But right now, the Cubs, I think, probably are favorites to win this division. This is the most wide open division in the sport, though. This is not a division that the Cubs are going to run away with, but would you look at the additions that they made? When you look at what they were doing all offseason, being aggressive in the trade market, trying to fix their issues that they had, trying to patch their holes with some solid one-year deals, some solid low-risk, high-return guys like a Justin Turner, like a Colin Rea. These guys, I think, were great additions to this team. I love what the Cubs did this offseason. They were busy. They moved off of some bad contracts, moved off of the guys that weren't going to stay with them in the long term, and they built a really solid roster. The over-under for this team reflects that. Near the top of the league at 85.5 games. I think they go over that. I think they win this division, and I think the Cubs make their way back to the playoffs, finishing 87-75. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about the Cubs offseason? What do you think? Do you think they're going to make the playoffs this year? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, going over everything from around the world of sports. I will see you then. You guys have a good one. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn.